These hidden stress traps may just be stealing your peace and joy in homemaking, and many of them are disguised as beautiful, well-meaning concepts. Today, I'm talking to you about the 8 ways and 8 habits that I have adopted to simplify my own homemaking, and you might want to as well. So if you're new to this channel, my name is Kiri, and I help homemakers get out of chaos and overwhelm and overstimulation and find true joy in their homemaking and confidence in their God-given role. So if that sounds good to you, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. The first stress trap to avoid is 1,000 hours outside. Okay, hear me out. I know that so many of you are going to disagree with me, and a lot of you probably are going to agree with me though too. So before having my third baby, me and my older kiddos, we were outside all the time, easily clocked in 1,000 hours outside, and just would spend hours and hours outside all the time. I really do see the value in spending an ample amount of your day being outside in the fresh air, letting your body adjust to the different temperatures of all the seasons. I totally understand that. However, having this third baby really humbled me in that area because it just got to the point where it was so stressful. It was not fun for anybody. I live in a very wet state, and so inevitably, no matter how smartly I had my children dressed, and how, set up I was for us to go outside, I would be trying to feed my baby and he wouldn't want to eat with the wrap on. And so I'd have milk spraying everywhere. And then, inevitably one of my toddlers would fall in the mud and be crying and need held. And, all kinds of things were happening. And it finally got to the point where I was just like, this is not fun for anybody. This is stressful. Let's just go inside, snuggle up by the fire, and read a story. And not that I ever really followed the 1,000 hours outside concept. I, for a time, did kind of clock in our hours because I just wanted to see and gauge what that looked like. How many hours would you actually have to spend outside to get 1,000 hours outside, all of that. So anyway, I did that, but I wasn't legalistic about it. I would just kind of gauge okay, so we should be out for a few hours during this season and 5 hours during this season, whatever. Anyway, that's besides the point. But it got to the point where I felt guilty if we weren't spending enough time outside because I was depriving my children of the ideal childhood that you see all over social media. And then if we were outside, it was stressful. So it was a no-win situation for us. And so I finally just let go of that. Okay, so then I read something not too long ago on Instagram, of course, and it really frustrated me because I was like, I understand that this person who posted this is very well-meaning, and I absolutely, like I said, see the value in spending a lot of time outside. However, I'll read it to you. Okay, so it says, encouraging a child to go outside in all weather builds resilience, but more importantly, it saves them from spending their life merely tolerating the bad days in favor of a handful of good ones. A life of endless expectations and conditions where happiness hinges on sunshine. Now, I'm not a big fan of being triggered online or anything like that, but if anything triggered me, it would be this. So I countered this argument, which has its foundation on happiness shouldn't have its hinges on sunshine. And I totally agree. I would agree to that. My counter would be that true happiness, and I mean true belly laughing joy, can be found within the 4 walls of your home and does not have to be just found outside. You can find happiness within the 4 walls of your home. True happiness is not reserved for only outdoors, friends. So if the 1,000 hours outside concept is serving you, great. Let me know in the comments below if you're loving it in this season of your life. And if it's not, also let me know in the comments below. Has this caused any sort of stress for you, you can just let that go. All right, so next is I stopped crippling my children. So the next stress trap, that is hard to say, the next stress trap that I avoid to make my life simpler as a homemaker with young children is I stopped doing things for my children that they are perfectly capable of doing all by themselves. Years ago, I heard a quote from Jordan Peterson, which, love him or hate him, this is the truth. He said something along the lines of, don't ever do anything for your children that they are capable of doing for themselves. And he went on to explain how serious he was about that when his children were young, that like he literally would not do a single thing if he knew that they could do it. And at first I was like, well, that's like a little much. But now I understand why. So I think this is pretty common among those first babies, especially. But when my eldest started getting to the point where he could do things on his own, I just didn't let him. And I think I did this for a few reasons. One, because I just wanted to be that helpful mommy. You know, you always want to do things for your kids and help them out. And especially if you're seeing them struggle on something, it's just kind of like innate that you want to help them out. But then also because I truly didn't even know, because he was my first, I didn't know what he was capable of. I didn't know how capable children are, very early in life to do things on their own. Things like getting dressed, feeding themselves, like all kinds of things. And then thirdly, is it was just easier for me to do things for him versus, having to teach him how to do something, or just taking the extra time to allow him to do something on his own. But the bottom line is that we always want to empower our children to do hard things. What has become a little family motto of ours is you were made to do hard things. And so with that comes, teaching your children how to do something, right? You don't just like send them out into the world and say, all right, figure it out, right? Like you have to teach them how to do something. And then lots of encouragement and lots of speaking life into that child as they're, learning a new skill. And it's going to be hard. Like there are times where, like, let's say, for example, your child is learning how to get themselves dressed. It could be hard. And one day it might be really easy and they're like able to get dressed super easily. And then one day it could take them a really long time. They could really be struggling. But if you let them struggle, you let them fight through that a little bit, all the while encouraging them, speaking life into them, and then giving them tons and tons of praise when they do accomplish that task, they're going to be so much more empowered to do it. And so the way that I do this is if I see that my child has done something once before, then they've proven that they can do it going forward. And like I said, it's not linear. Sometimes are harder than others and, they have to fight through it a little bit more. But nevertheless, they've proven that they can do it themselves. And so I let them do it themselves going forward. And then second is if I see them do a similar task, I try and translate that into other tasks and, teach them how this task is very similar to this task. And so you can do it and all of that. So getting dressed is a great example. It's also a great segue into my next point. So your children are getting dressed on their own, which is great. But what if they pick out clothes that just don't match? And then you have to leave the house with your children looking like a ragamuffin. So having too many clothes for your children, in my opinion, is a big mistake. So if you keep less clothes on hands for your kids, they're not going to have too many options to pick from. And then if you make sure that those little options that you do have all kind of somewhat match, then you can use that second hack that I just told you, that second habit that I just told you, which is not enabling your children and letting them do things on their own. And you can say, okay, go get dressed for the day. And then they will get dressed for the day, and whatever they pick out is going to match. It's going to look good. They're going to look at least somewhat put together, and you don't either have to change them yourself or make them feel bad for, picking something out that doesn't match, or leave and go wherever you're going with your kids looking mismatched. So once you do this, once you simplify their wardrobe, make sure everything matches somewhat, then you can really just empower them and give them the freedom to dress themselves, choose whatever they want to wear for the day. And then you can start doing that without even having to ask them, which helps in a big way. So that brings me to my next habit to simplify homemaking, which is to avoid the stress trap of having to ask your children to do everything that you want them to do in a day and teach them habit stacking. How annoying is it to constantly have to ask your children to do every little thing that you want them to do in a day? I found myself getting so annoyed with myself, barking orders at my kids, asking them all the time, having to do things. And I just kind of felt like a nag, and I didn't like that. And so I implemented something with my eldest son that I use myself, which is habit stacking. So habit stacking is when you create or you form a new habit riding on the coattails of an existing habit that you already have in place. And so that existing habit acts as the trigger to remember to do the next habit. So I knew that I wanted my son to do 4 things every morning before he sat at the breakfast table. So 1 is get dressed for the day, 2, make his bed, 3, fill him and his sister's water bottles, and 4, pull the laundry from the dryer, put it in a laundry basket, and put the laundry basket on the coffee table. Keep in mind, my son is 4, okay? And I started this probably when he was like sometime around 3.5. So the way that we do it is we have a Hatch sound machine, and it has all these lights that you can turn on. And so we have taught him that the blue light means he can get out of bed and get out of his room for the day. So when that blue light comes on, he knew that he could get out of his room for the day. And that started probably around 2. So that blue light acted as the trigger, right? That blue light acted as the first habit. Okay, I can get out of my bed and leave the room. Okay, so then I taught him first to get dressed for the day. So he sees the blue light now. So that blue light's the trigger, and now it's getting dressed for the day, and then it's leaving the room. So then after getting dressed for the day, I taught him making his bed and then leaving the room. And then once making his bed was solidified, once that habit was solidified, then it went to filling up the waters when he came downstairs. Then once that was solidified, then it was the laundry. So you do it little bit by little bit, and it just becomes like second nature to them. Like that's just what he does now when he wakes up, and I don't even have to say anything, but all 4 of those things are done, which is great because I don't have to do them myself. And also it's great because that gives me a little runway time in the morning when he gets up for me to kind of tie up loose ends around the house, or get his breakfast on the table. So it's a huge help in simplifying my homemaking. So if you are overwhelmed trying to get systems like this in place in your home, I have a free homemaking workshop where I talk about how you can take your home from chaos to joy, and I give you a 7-day homemaking reset. And so it'll take your home from chaos to joy in 7 days or less. So I talk a lot about biblical mindset things, as well as habits like this that you can form in your home to create systems in your home. So the link for that is below. That's my free homemaking workshop. I'd love for you to join me there. All right, so it sounds like I kind of run a tight ship around here, which I do, but we also have a lot of fun. And one way that I have intentionally helped us to have things to look forward to is by creating anchors in our day. These anchors serve as things that we are working towards throughout the day, things that we can look forward to. Everyone in the house can look forward to. And these anchors vary from day to day, but we do have some constant anchors. For example, every day our anchors are meal times, which who doesn't look forward to mealtime? Sleep times, which kind of that's just me and my husband that look forward to that. But, my kids enjoy the rest too. But then I also have things, like I said, that vary day to day. So like we have Tea Time Tuesday. And that's where I just set up kind of like a little tea party. I make my children some tea and give them a little snack, and that's been a lot of fun, and we can look forward to that. I do that right when I start our Bible time for the day on Tuesdays. And Tuesday's the beginning of our week, so it's kind of just something to like start us off on the right foot. And also I did that intentionally because I want them to just have good memories of Bible time together as a family. So Tea Time Tuesday. is one of our anchors. We also have pack and play time where I put my kids in a pack and play together and they play with a fun activity. So that's an anchor. Bible school is another anchor for another day. So just having something to look forward to, having something that you are working towards can really just add fun to your homemaking, and it can simplify your homemaking because you're all together as a family working towards, that one thing. So I mentioned mealtime being one of our anchors that we look forward to. And I totally understand that for some moms, you would laugh at that because you're like, I do not look forward to mealtime with my kids. And to that, I say, if you keep catering to picky eaters, it's going to create super stressful meal times. And mealtime should actually be a time of just joy and fellowship with your family. So stop catering to picky eaters would be my next stress trap to avoid. So for one, I don't make separate meals for my children. They eat what we're having for dinner, and they get used to all kinds of flavors because of that. They have pretty advanced palates, I feel like, for such young children, because I've just never made a separate meal for them. They always eat what I make for dinner, and we just eat as a family. And yes, of course, if something is not their favorite, if they don't like a particular thing, I won't make that, right? I'll try not to make things that they just don't like, because everybody has preferences, right? So I try to be considerate with that. But for the most part, they're just eating what we're eating, and they don't have to eat all of what we're eating. If there's something that they really don't like, they don't have to have that. But I don't make a separate meal entirely. Okay, and then the next stress trap pertaining to food specifically is that in our house, there are times to eat and times to not eat. And this wasn't always the case. I didn't always do this because, I don't know, my mama heart was kind of like, oh, well, if my kids are hungry, then I want to feed them. Or if they're not hungry, I don't want to force feed them. But then I realized that I was getting resentful because I was always in the kitchen, like every 10 to 30 minutes, because my kids would eat 2 bites of their meal and then they'd be hungry right after that. And this created huge issues if we were going anywhere, and maybe wherever we were going, there wasn't food available, or they wouldn't be able to eat. And so then they were just hungry and grouchy while we were there. Or I could give them a snack, but then at breakfast time, they know they're going to get a snack later. And so why would they eat their breakfast when they know that they're just going to get a snack in 30 minutes when we get to wherever we're going? So now we don't do that anymore. We have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we really don't do a lot of snacks. We do the Tea Time Tuesday, like I mentioned, and every once in a while we'll do a dessert, but typically even the snacks, like the snacky type things, we will just have as part of our dinner or as part of our meal. So it's not like a lot of in-betweeny type of snacks, because that really just creates a habit. And I find that my children are so much happier when they just eat at mealtime, because they eat a lot of the food that, like real food, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They eat a lot of that food, more so than when they're eating snacks throughout the day. But also they're happier because they're not on that glucose roller coaster. We're not spiking their blood sugar every 30 minutes or hour. It just takes a lot of the decisions and questions out of the day too. It's like, okay, I just have to decide what we're having for 3 meals a day. I don't have to decide snacks. I don't have to buy snacks. They're not used to snacks. I'm not in and out of the kitchen giving them snacks and cleaning up after them eating and wiping them up and then doing it over and over again all day long. So it really just eliminates a lot of stress for me. So what do we do if they're just not that hungry when it's time to eat? So because I am a stay-at-home mom, I kind of have more flexibility. So if they're not hungry at breakfast time right when they wake up in the morning, that's fine. I can just push it out a little bit and wait until they are hungry. Or if they just decide that they don't want to eat that much at breakfast time, that's fine, but then we're not eating again until lunchtime, and they know that. So typically they won't just eat a couple bites and then, leave. However, of course, I try to be considerate. So if they barely ate at breakfast time and it's 11 o'clock and they're starving, then we'll have an early lunch. So I'm totally fine with that. I saved for last what I think is probably the biggest stress trap for mothers, and that is toys. I think that most families would be better off by getting rid of 99% of their toys, but I'm not that extreme. So I'm going to tell you what I do. So we use bins. Yes, I'm a bin mama. But even the way that I do bins, I feel like is probably different than some moms. So we have bins separated by toy type, and typically we only keep out open-ended toys. So that's like blocks, magnet tiles, Lego, Duplos, things like that. Open-ended toys, I call it toys that they play with and they build their creations with versus toys that play for them. So toys that are like really loud and noisy, things like that. But we do have those kind of toys too, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. So we keep those open-ended toys out so that they can really be creative when they're playing with toys. And they can only have one bin out at a time. So when they're done with that, then we wrap that bin up and we put it away and we can get another bin. This helps them to focus. This is a good thing. They can focus on one task, one toy, rather than just taking a bunch of toys out, dumping them out, and then all of a sudden you're like, why is my house a disaster? And they're not even playing with any of these toys. And then you feel stressed because of the visual clutter, and they're bored because there's too many options out for them. They don't know where to go. It's stressful for them too. So also in any given bin, we don't have too many toys. So my rule of thumb is if the whole bin is dumped out and I look at it and I'm overwhelmed by the mess that's created, then they're for sure going to be overwhelmed and going to have a hard time cleaning that up. And then it's just going to be a battle. And so we only have, a reasonable amount of toys in each bin to where if the whole thing is dumped out, it'll take like 2 seconds to clean up and they can clean it up themselves. So that's what we do. Now, I will say that the only time we do have multiple bins out at one time is like if we're having a play date. And if we are having a play date, then I totally allow the kids to just go ham and put all the toys out at one time. And that's worth it to me to have that chaos. That is a little stressful at the end of the play date to clean up. But even then, it doesn't take too long to clean up. And it was worth it for me because, I got to talk to another mom. Okay, this works really well I know a lot of you have family members and loved ones that like to buy those really kind of flashy toys, the ones that I talked about before, where the toys play for the children versus the children playing the toy. Like it's noisy, it talks for them, it moves around for them. There is a place for those toys in our house, and that is in its own little bin, or it's actually kind of a big bin. I know that's so fun for family members to give kids, right? Because they're like really flashy and it's fun for the kids to open and enjoy for the moment. But what I have found is that they don't really have longevity unless you use them very strategically. When I really need to get something done. Like it's a really important task that I need to get done and I want like my focused energy on that task and I don't want to be interrupted a million times. I will pull out that bin with all those flashy toys. And I only do this. The only way this works is if you only pull that bin out maybe like once a quarter, like not even once a month. That's too much. So like once a quarter, you pull it out and let them go crazy with all those toys. They're going to be so new and fresh because they don't get to play with them often, and that it will give you so much time to do everything that you need to do. So that's what I do about toys, and it works really well for us. I think the one thing though with the bin situation is that a lot of families may not have room for that many toys. And to that I say, get rid of them. Like if you don't have room for them, kids really don't need a lot of toys. Toys are a bonus. Kids can make a blanket a toy for an hour. So, you really don't need to have a lot of toys. But if you have the luxury of having the space for a lot of toys, it still can be stressful if you're not using them to your advantage. So that's what I do. That's my strategy. So if you're interested in how to actually steward your home well, I would invite you to watch this next video. I'm going to give you a hint. It has nothing to do with house cleaning. And I hope to see you in that free workshop using the link below. You can find it there. And thank you so much for joining me today. It's always such a pleasure to have you here.